Thank you, Dr. Curiel, for joining us today. Living in Tucson, Arizona, these new recommendations by the FDA about sunscreens have an enormous impact on us and selecting the proper sunscreen at the local drugstore. So tell us a little bit about what these recommendations cover.
Yes, thank you, Pam, for having me here today. And I think this is definitely great news for everyone, especially here in Arizona, when we're daily exposed to such a significant level of UV rays. The implications are several, and I will describe them quite briefly per succinct to you. The first one has to do with the level of protection that we are going to be reading on the new labeling for sunscreen, and what is the spectrum that is going to be protecting us against. In the past, there has been criteria for UVB and UVA protection, but no real specific testing for the UVA component, which is one of the wavelengths of the UV rays that can cause also skin cancer. Now, in order for the pharmaceutical companies to have a label for broad spectrum, they need to comply with very specific testing for UVB and UVA in order to be able to have that category of broad spectrum. The next level has to do with the SPF. Those brands and those specific type of sunscreen that are going to be having and labeling as SPF up to 14, anywhere from 2 to 14, they're not going to be able to claim that they can prevent skin cancer. In order to claim skin cancer protection, there has to be SPF 15 or above. What is also interesting is that there's still not a complete agreement on this point, but it is likely that they will not allow sunscreen products to claim that they have SPF greater than 50. They will only be able to say 50 plus, but not a higher number than 50, since it hasn't been proven that SPF greater than 50 will be able to truly prevent skin cancer. The last implication has to do with the way how we use this sunscreen. As you probably have seen, so many of the different products, many of them claim that they're true waterproof, sport-proof, sweat-proof. But now, in order to be able to claim this category of water resistant, they're also going to need to have a specific test they're going to need to go through, and they're going to need to tell the users and the clients for how long is that protection going to be good for, and when do they need to reapply, how many minutes they're going to need to be able to apply that later. The other important issue is that now all brands are going to be required to have their active ingredients listed in the back of the product. So users can be educated in the long run and really understand that it's not just about buying a brand, it's about understanding the ingredients and how they need to be used.
A few years ago, we did a story together, and you were horrified about some of the things that were on the market that really had no protection at all. How do these new guidelines make you feel in terms of people selecting a good sunscreen?
You know, it is a step forward. We agree on that. Where is the ultimate solution? Probably not. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done in educating people on how to protect themselves when they're out in the sun. And it's not just about sunscreen. I think that's something that people need to understand out there, especially living here in Arizona. Sunscreen is one component of sun protection. If you're going to be out there, try to avoid indirect sunlight between 10 o'clock in the morning and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when the UV rays are specifically more direct. And the other component is clothing. I mean, in fact, clothing is probably a key element if you're going to be exposed at key times of the day, in the middle of the day, or for an extended period of time. And there are wonderful brands out there right now that have greater models. People didn't like to use them before because they weren't quite appealing, but they're much better now, and I think people need to complement them with a sunscreen, avoidance of peak time of sun exposure, and some protective clothing.
Sometimes we get questions about sprays and how to use those effectively, and you had some interesting tips about those.
Yes, sprays is always a big question. Is how much do you need to spray in order to have equivalent protection as what you will get with a lotion? And that hasn't really been studied properly. So there is no true recommendation on exactly how to go with a spray to confer you that SPF they're claiming. It's more about common sense. If you're going to put the spray, be thorough with it, make sure you don't skip any areas, but also be careful with the breathing while you're applying the aerosol from the spray. So try to hold your breath while you're putting the spray on. This is very challenging with children, which is the one that we usually use it the most with, and you're chasing them around, right, trying to get them on. And so try to teach them to stand still, hold their breath while you're putting your spray of sunscreen, and be thorough with it. And always for the face, use your lotion. That's probably the most protective and safest way to go.
Well, thank you, Dr. Curiel, for joining us today and clarifying some of these new recommendations.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Pam.